History Inside a Nutshell, the show where we sail into our port of call discussing maritime history.
I mentioned her in the last video, but I thought that she deserves a video on her own. This is a script that I have been working on for a while, but based on new research, I think I can honestly say that this is the script that is going to blow your mind. And without further ado, I give you the story of Ada Garland, the lost nurse of the HMHS Britannic. Of all the 60,000 voluntary aid detachment volunteer nurses, there is a story which has often been surrounded in mystery. That story belongs to Ada Garland, a Devonshire nurse who had joined the White Star liner, the HMHS Britannic, during the ship's time serving as a hospital ship. You wouldn't find Ada's story online as it's difficult to find. There isn't a surviving photograph of her. However, a recent discovery sets to change all of that. The discovery is of Ada's memoirs of her time as a voluntary aid detachment nurse, and some of the pages contain details on how she survived the sinking of the Britannic. From her own words, we will shed a light and retell her story of bravery, courage, and inspiration. Ada Garland was born on the 20th of August 1892 in a small village in Cornwall, located in the county of Devonshire, England. She was known for having an intellect and creative mind and thirsty for knowledge and learning. In her lifetime, she had worked for authors like T.S. Eliot and had taught herself how to play the cello and violin. When she joined the Voluntary Aid Detachment as a nurse, Ada wrote in her memoirs that working in military hospital life was like a free missionary without any mystery or secret. It wasn't known when she joined, but it is believed that Ada joined the VAD either before or in May 1916. In the autumn of 1916, she and 76 voluntary aid detachment nurses boarded the HMHS Britannic after travelling on a tender ship from Southampton docks on Saturday the 23rd of September. She and the nurses left the same day with the Britannic. In her memoirs of the disaster, Ada described the Britannic as a beautiful picture anchored with the evening sun glittering on the waters around, showing up her white paint and the deep green band around. Hundreds of little green electric lights lit up two huge red crosses on either side. Ada had a lot of time on board to travel about the ship and work on various locations. However, we won't get into detail about the routine as there is a video about it already. When the Britannic arrived in the Porto di Napoli in Naples on the 17th of November, Ada noted that while the Britannic was in the port, she recorded the activity of the infamous Mountain Versus was enveloped in mist, but it was smoking in the early morning sun. While the ship was in the port, she and the nurses had the tour of the city. Ada and the other nurses went to a restaurant called Marconi, Italy, a local museum, and St. Elmo prison, where most of the criminals were naval officers and men who defrauded the Italian government. On the morning of Tuesday, the 21st of November, Ada, who slept in after a long shift, arrived late for breakfast in the dining saloon. Then, at 8:20 a.m., she heard an unfamiliar sound which vibrated the Britannic. In her memoirs, Ada describes the scene. I had just sat down and started on some stewed pears when we heard a loud report and indescribable noise. It appeared we had come into collision of something. Everyone jumped up. Trays dropped from stewards' shaking hands, and there was a clatter of broken glass, but everyone soon came to their senses and were told to sit down. Everything was all right. We had only run into a barge. But of course, the Britannic didn't run into a barge. She ran into a mine that was planted by the German submersible U-73. It didn't take long to take action, as seconds later, a doctor ran into the saloon crying, "Ladies, you must get into your cabins and fit your lifebelts, then hurry to the boat deck." At first, Ada thought that the ship wasn't sinking. However, she had a premonition while she was walking to her cabin to retrieve her lifebelt. I distinctly remember as I quietly walked the beautiful marble staircase and along the long corridor where the sun streamed in the portholes, lighting up all our lovely cabins. This was goodbye to everything. Ada collected her lifebelt, coat and rug, and in haste, she went along the corridors to the wards to see if there were patients who needed her assistance. However, unlike her calm nature, Ada describes the panic from the patients, nurses, and even the matron was crying out her instructions. It was a terrible sight, men who could barely walk, struggling to climb the stairs. The screams and the shouts could be heard all over the ship as the badly injured were being moved. We all helped until the very last minute when we heard the cry of our dear brave matron saying, "Hurry up, my children." Eventually, Ada made it to the boat deck and climbed into lifeboat 17. But, as we all know, a space inside a lifeboat doesn't guarantee a seat for survival. And Ada learnt this the hard way when she describes the events inside lifeboat 17. Having climbed into our lifeboat, we were lowered away only to discover halfway down the plug wasn't in the bottom of the boat. There we were suspended in mid-air whilst the important item was found. Down we were lowered again. It took some time before we managed to get away from the tremendous structure of the boat. The occupants in lifeboat 17 took oars and rowed away from the Britannic, and Ada witnessed the Britannic sinking until she was out of sight, leaving behind wreckage and overturned and battered lifeboats in the Argentinian Sea. Ada never mentioned the name of the Beagle-class destroyer that picked up the lifeboat, but it was believed that Ada and the rest of the occupants were picked up by either the HMHS Scrooge, the HMHS Foxhound, or the HMHS Heroic. When Ada and the occupants were on board, she would describe the conditions that she couldn't tolerate. We were ushered into a tiny cabin. Imagine a cabin for 6, and we were scores crowded in that little room, with the wounded men on little tables shrieking in pain. The heat and smell was such that I can remember being pulled out from being crouched up under the table and a glass of brandy forced down my throat, and at last being able to breathe good clean air. I was soon revived. The class destroyer then made her journey from the Britannic's sinking position to the Bay of Piraeus, and during the trip, Ada and the nurses and the wounded men received blankets, coats, and a selection of tea, biscuits, oranges, and ham sandwiches. Following the sinking, Ada wrote that before and following the implosion, the Britannic's watertight doors weren't closed and the impact struck the machinery. While it is confirmed that the watertight doors weren't closed, it is believed that the captain, Charles Bartlett, gave the orders for the doors to be closed. The impact of the implosion damaged the watertight door to the fireman's tunnel and the doors between the boiler rooms 5 and 6, with water flowing further aft into number 5. The Britannic could have survived longer like her sister, the Titanic. However, the nurses had left their porthole windows open along the lower decks, and that would seal the fate of the younger Olympic-class liner. Ada stayed in the city of Athens, but little is known of her following the sinking of the Britannic. She died on the 24th of April 1959 in her hometown of Devon. While we may never know the in-depth truth of Ada's story, we hope that her story will resurface again and become an important piece of the history of the HMHS Britannic.
If if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe for future videos. Until next time, this has been History Inside a Nutshell, departing from the docks. Thank you so much for all of your support and enjoy the rest of your voyage.